Richard, we always like to get from every one of our experts what drives them. What's their passion? What do they want? What's their main, like, just what is it that keeps you up at night going, oh my gosh, that's amazing, we can't wait to implement that? What drove you to CEO space? What drives you in CEO space? What drives you to this coaching world, life success world, and just helping people?
Well, it's an interesting question. My business, I call it a why. What's the why that you do what you do, Dan? To anyone looking at this, what's the why that drives you to do something? When I went to CEO Space, I was practicing chiropractic, and I had my BS degree in business management, which is just that is BS. I learned theory and philosophy. I never learned how to be an entrepreneur. I learned how to metaphorically at least go punch a clock and make someone money. When I went to CEO Space, over the following 9 months, my practice grew by over 50%. And I didn't change anything inside the four walls. What I changed was outside, how I branded and marketed and spoke to what I did. I became an entrepreneur. And I ultimately retired from 30 years in chiropractic to work with CEO Space. The why that drives me, Dan, is my soul's purpose. This is not a vision statement. This is not a mission statement. This is my soul's purpose, is to elegantly inspire people to awaken to their magnificence through love, humor, joy, and passion. And that's what I do with everything I do in my life. So doing this is hopefully to inspire people to awaken to their magnificence, as the conversations you and I have had. And if you don't have a big enough why in your life, go find one. Go find something that turns that fire on so that you can transform lives and make some profound changes. It's the why that drives us. And then I have another model on life. If it's not fun, don't do it. If it's not fun, don't do it. And if you must do it and it's not fun, make it fun. Give it a different story and make it fun. So does that answer that question?
Yes, it does. And it's funny when you say that, if it does make it fun, make it fun. Immediately it clicked a statement that Bob Proctor said to me. Was he says, you only have to do something till you want to do it. Then you don't have to do it anymore. And it's very true that, and I guess if you can, and please tell me if I'm off kilter here, but you can actually relate that back to the story. Is you
Absolutely.
change the story about it, and if it's not fun, change the story about it. Perfect example is I was in transportation, and still to this day I'm in transportation, and this is kind of like a side business plus another side business plus another side business. There's three or four things going on right now, and what really drives me and what my passion truly is this right here,
Mm-hmm.
is meeting people, sharing information with people all over the world that can come and get it for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, if this helps one person in the world, we've done our job. And
And
that's
so what is your why with this? What is the why behind that?
my why behind all of this and all of these videos and this website, is teaching people that when they hit this wall that they call failure, there is something beautiful on this side of it.
Yeah.
And it all started back, and I know you know the story, but we had an the biggest, and Della Mancella, lovely lady, had told me, you got to stop calling it a failure because you're embedding it in your brain.
Right.
We hit an obstacle that seemed to be the end of the end, and the F word was so profound in it, and I actually just call it the F word now, just because,
Yeah.
because sometimes you do have to use that to get your point across to somebody. Because not everybody can take anything that a seemingly insurmountable obstacle and turn it into a positive. So
Right.
by using that word, it really ingrains deep. But and it was one of these things where I didn't want to get out of bed.
Mm.
It was years of energy,
Mm.
years of belief, passion, missing out on things, not going places, sitting in front of my computer, organizing R&D, 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 refining, 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 refining. And then we set forth, and the company put it out to the world. And it was a flop. I mean, beyond what a flop can be. And immediately, just for an example, during this whole process, I owned a partner and I owned a transportation company that did well over best year was probably 8 million. Slow year was probably $5.5 million a year in sales, earning an amazing income. That company completely disintegrated
Mm.
because so much of my focus, passion, energy,
Right.
my life vibration was put into this other company. And the failure, you sit back and say, I've given up 19 years of my life
Mm.
in this other company and other industry. I've given up. I mean, we no longer have that company. This didn't go. Where's the income coming from? And all these things start hitting you. And I didn't want to get out of bed, Richard.
Yeah.
And I don't wish that feeling on my worst enemy.
Mm.
I don't wish that feeling on the worst human that can walk the face of the earth. I don't wish that feeling on them because that feeling is something that just, I mean, I'm going on 19 years of personal development.
Mm-hmm.
Right back from the power of positive thinking when my dad handed it to me when I was 16 years old, saying, Dan, you've got to stop the path you're on.
Yeah.
You are on a very destructive path. I was not in a good place in my teenage years. I was not hanging around with the right people. My dad gave it to me, and from that point I started studying personal development.
Wow.
And 19 years of it did not prepare me for the feelings internally, externally, my reactions, and I'm going to call it reaction because it wasn't a response. It was a reaction to all of this. And I stopped. And it was actually, you know what? It's funny because we were just talking about how you're going to be so gracious to give a lot of our subscribers that hit some of the links below some coaching calls. Well, it's when you put me in touch with Bernie that Bernie and I had a conversation. He introduced me to Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill's book in 2011, his new book. From that book, I got introduced to Sharon Lecture. Now, Sharon wrote 3 Feet from Gold.
Mm-hmm.
That book got me out of bed because as soon as I picked it up, I didn't put it down till it was done. It got me out of bed and it got me to realize this is all part of it. This is all part of what happens. But, you know, they say don't look back to the past, but until I sat with Bernie and he introduced me to that book and then I read that book and then I got introduced to another book and then I read that book, we're talking a 3-week span still. But had I not spoken to Bernie, I would not have found it. And maybe this would, you know what I mean? That's the story that I attribute to it and that's the story that I have involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
But for those 2 weeks before you and I had the conversation and Bernie Dorman and I had the conversation, it changed my whole life. But
Yeah.
what path do most people take when that happens? They take the path that leads to nowhere. They take the path to failure. They take the path to fear and not going out and doing something that they truly have passion in.
Right.
So now our passion is to get this message out that, you know what, it's okay. And yeah, it's going to hurt. You're going to have feelings that you've never come across before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about how you deal with them.
Yeah.
And our goal by sitting with you and by sitting with every other expert is to show that we've all done it.
Yeah.
You know, like we started researching, we started speaking to people, and we started asking questions to people when all this was ramping up. And we've come to the realization that a lot of people believe when, you know, a guy like Tony Robbins will say, well, yeah, you know, I had this business deal. And yeah, I've lost in business before. I lost $4 million in this business deal. Their first response, Richard, is, you're Tony Robbins. You can afford to lose $4 million.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to lose $500 in this business deal. Well, that $4 million to Tony is really like $500 to you. And it's all in perspective. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be times when things aren't going to go the way you think you are. We started realizing, we started pushing it back to entrepreneurs are like water. And when obstacles come in their way, we find ways around it. And if we can all operate our lives in the theory of you hit an obstacle, yes, that obstacle might hurt. They usually do because it's all about ego instead of we go. And when you put, you know, this other company, I had 5 years invested in it, where every single waking moment above and beyond the transportation company I was involved in was focused on that. So it's 5 years of, you know, people saying, yeah, Dan, what you guys are doing is awesome. And your business partner saying what we're doing is awesome, for the market to tell you something completely different. It doesn't mean it's not awesome. I now believe it just means it wasn't the right market
or the right timing. And by the
or the
way,
right time.
Sharon Lechter, we have such remarkable presenters at CEO Space. The instructional team is amazing. Sharon's presenting at the July Forum. So
Oh, is she
it's,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, as is Les Brown and some other notable people. Um, Rob Riopel from the Peak Potentials team. Very, very powerful programs that we produce. And part of it, we're not a motivational place. We're a business development place. But when you're sitting and having lunch or breakfast or dinner, because Dan, as you know, there are 20 hours of dining when you're with the faculty, with the trainers, with their mentors. And when you're sitting with Sharon or Les or Rob, you can only grow. You can't hide from yourself. Your story
Yes.
changes. So it's pretty profound. Pretty profound.
It is.
And thank you for sharing that story. That's really,
Oh,
really
well,
wonderful. So,
thank you. I appreciate that. That wasn't what this was about. I wanted you to share, but it's I'm so passionate about it, and I believe in it so much that this is something that kills. And I would love to get statistics, Richard. And I don't even think it's feasible, but I would love to get statistics as how many people have stopped dead in their tracks because of a seemingly insurmountable obstacle.
and that's the key word, Dan. Seemingly.
Yes.
Seemingly insurmountable.
Yeah.
It's like that boulder in the road the other day. I mean, I'm in
Yeah.
gratitude that we didn't come across it. It is as big as we wish it to be. And there's so many models from NLP to, Gestalt and all kinds of models. You don't need psychotherapy, but you have to put things in perspective. And again, I'll use my divorce as a model. It was really tough at the time. And it was one of the best, worst days of my life because it allowed me to move to a new place instead of hanging into the old. It allowed me to see what I will no longer tolerate in relationship. See, there are two things that motivate us in life, and only two: pain and pleasure. And if you look at anything you have done in your life, this is for every listener, just not just for you, Dan, it's motivated by pain or pleasure. It could be the avoidance of pain or the attainment of pleasure. So, being very personal about this divorce, and when one person's not happy in a relationship, nobody's happy. It's just so in this relationship, for both of us, the pain of leaving was more intense than the pain of staying. So we stayed. And then it shifted to a point where for her, the pain of staying was more than the pain of leaving. Mm-hmm. I got served divorce papers. Now, again, we're friends and all that stuff. The gifts in it, was it insurmountable? Well, yeah, in the moment it was. Mm-hmm. But as we move through these obstacles and we circle around them and look back, we recognize, oh, shoot, that was a boulder. Again, using that metaphor of that thing in the road. So what? How many people do we know? I was hurt. I was taken advantage of. You brought up Tony. Great story. Lost $4 million. Trust me, that hurt him. I know Tony. That would hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. But he didn't use it as an anchor. We can use pain, rage, anger as an anchor to hold us someplace, or we can use it as a fuel to propel us into what's next. It's a choice. It's a decision. And what I've learned to do in my life, and it's an invitation to everyone watching this, use that rage, that anger, that hurt, that abuse, whatever it is, as fuel to move you to next instead of as an anchor to hold you into the past. Past is there.
Is there any way that you would be able to, and I'm trying to, internally I'm trying to, the hamster's turning. Is there any way you would be able to give some suggestions on taking that rage and turning it into anger, or would it be based on more of a per situation?
Well, good question. And it's always situational. Yeah. And it's just, where do you want to direct it? How many people go through life driving, looking in the rearview mirror, blaming their history on their situation? Walt Disney, classic, went bankrupt once that I know of it. I don't care what you think or anyone thinks of Donald Trump. He's bankrupted a couple of properties. He's still making billions of dollars. Again, politics aside, hairstyles aside,
Well,
you
I
don't
just read
use
Midas
it
Touch.
as an excuse not to move
Yes.
forward. You take it,
Yes.
you evaluate it, you learn from it, and then you use it to go forward. So it's always situational. There's no quick fix. So, it's this. Oh God, if life were to be that easy. So you use it again as the fuel to propel you. It's a choice. It's always a choice.
That brings it back to what you
I got
said
it.
at the beginning: is the choice change your story, change your choice on how you see it, and it changes everything.
Changes your life in a heartbeat. That's all it takes. Different perspective. If you, Dan, were walking on it's a classic story, heard it this weekend again. If I put you on a 5-inch wide steel beam and ask you to walk 20 feet across and that beam's lying on the ground, would you do it?
Yep.
Absolutely. Now I put that beam 200 feet in the air between two buildings.
Changes my perspective. It's a hell of a lot scarier.
It's a hell of a lot scarier. Same 5 inches. Same 5 inches. But our perspective. So let's say you're walking along an elevated wall and there's a precipice on one side and ground on the other, but there's a precipice over there and there's a little wind blowing and your heart starts it's palpitations, your heart's going, you break out in a little sweat, you're a little bit afraid of falling perhaps, yes?
Yep.
Okay. And you walk into a room, if you're single, and you see a woman if you're a guy, or a guy if you're a woman, and you get palpitations in your heart, and you break out in a little sweat. Same physiological response. One's, wow. One's, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Same physiology. So where do we attach meaning?
It's the meaning you attach to it is where it changes. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's an interesting, you know what, you're absolutely right. That's a very interesting analogy. The way you put that was, yeah.
Yeah.
That it's still going in my head. It's still, but I mean,
I don't know how much time we've got, but I want to respect your clock here. So
no, that's fine. That's fine.
Where do we want to
go? Okay, I guess the last question then would be I'm going to ask you if you can give a couple of pieces of advice to all of our viewers to help them change their beliefs and what they're truly capable of accomplishing.
Wow. How do you change your belief to what you're fully capable of accomplishing? I'm going to go back to that 4-step process.
All right, we'll ask that then. Richard, for our last question, we wanted to ask because, I mean, it's a question that inspires a lot of thought in everybody. And if you were to give a couple of action steps that can help anyone watching this, and so it's going to be very generally based, I know that, but anyone watching this, change the beliefs in themselves and what they're truly capable of. Taking, knowing they're going to be hitting obstacles, seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but knowing that they have what it takes to do whatever it is they want to do. What would be some key pieces of advice you would give them right off the bat?
First step is take action. Sitting, as you acknowledged when you were, and I'm going to use the word depressed, when you're in that depressed state, the best way to get out of depression is move. You can't be depressed if you're out at a gym, on a treadmill, on a bike, swimming. It's really tough to be depressed. If I said to you, and Tony, so you've done some of this stuff. I'm telling you, behind that curtain, there's a person who is depressed. Can you tell me their body language? Are their shoulders back, or are they kind of slumped forward?
Mm-hmm. If they're depressed, they're going to be shrunk forward. They're going to be more in the curled state.
Is their head up and straight, or is it kind of leaning down towards their chest?
It's going to be leaning down towards their chest.
Is their breathing rich and deep, or is it shallow?
Very shallow.
How do you know that? Because we've all been there. Okay?
Yes. Well, it's like Tony says, you wouldn't know a good paycheck if you never got a bad paycheck.
So now behind door number 2, there's someone who just won the lottery. Their physiology, their shoulders are back, their head is up, they're breathing deeply, probably in their nose and out their mouth. That's the way to take action steps. That physiology changes things profoundly. There are three things that can be done to change your perspective. One is focus. Where do you focus? Do you focus on that rearview mirror and the crap that happened in the past, or do you focus on the potential for what's ahead? Change your language. What is your language? How aggravating it is to hear someone say, I can't, or I'm a failure, or I know this won't work. Man, you're anchoring that. Change your language. I can do this. It may take time. Get the right team, the right counsel. That's where CEO space is so brilliant, because you get to network with so many brilliant people. Three, as we just discussed, change physiology. It's universal. Language, focus, physiology. Will it guarantee success? The antithesis will pretty much guarantee failure. So you move forward, move in the direction. With those three key things, Dan, life changes in a heartbeat.